A very good evening and thanks for clicking on to the Sunday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. While for many it was another glorious April day, it wasn't for everybody, and this was the capture taken late this morning on the A9 just below Inverness. It was a dreek old day across the north of Scotland with that kind of marine influence hanging on, keeping the temperatures pegged back, and there was even a little bit of rain coming out of the clouds through the course of today. I think it was really just the kind of dew point and the amount of moisture in the air. It was actually forming some precipitation, but we've got this set up in place at the moment here where high pressure is very, very dominant across the north. We've got areas of low pressure trapped underneath that, creating a very mixed picture and very messy picture across central and western portions of Europe. But the British Isles is under the influence of that area of high pressure. We've got our winds coming in from the northeast, and with that you can see here just faintly that kind of grey colour on the chart representing the low cloud, and that kind of stuck around north and eastern portions of Scotland and even down the eastern side of England through the course of this morning, and throughout the course of the day it didn't really burn off at all. So that's why we've got temperatures plenty of 8s on the chart at the moment, extending from Altnahara down to Bulmer, and we've even got a 7 here on the Yorkshire coast here. Factoring in the breeze coming in from the northeast, we've got of course water temperatures 6 to 8 Celsius at the moment, and it is feeling quite nippy indeed. Big difference though, the further south and west you went here. You can see temperatures even as of recording at 6 p.m. We've got temperatures as high as 18 Celsius, and I think we're knocking the door of 20 this afternoon. But in today's video, actually, I want to look at the precipitation, April precipitation across the British Isles, because we've got some very interesting things showing up here. Certainly in recent times, in recent years, we have seen a significant drop-off in rainfall across more or less all of the British Isles. There is a few exceptions far north of Scotland. I think we've got some above normal precipitation percentages, but certainly for the bulk of the British Isles, this is another very dry April indeed. And when you look back at recent years, there is a very distinct trend in terms of April precipitation. This is 2021, so last year a very, very dry April indeed. 2020 was also a very, very dry April also. 2019, it was dry, not quite as dry as the last couple of years, but interesting, still the trend drier than normal. You have to go back to 2018 for the last time we had a somewhat wetter than normal April. So this was the period 1st through 30th of April in 2018, and it was a wet April across the UK here. Now this is an interesting graphic here for UK April precipitation, tweeted by Daniel at London and South East. Is the Snow Dreamer. If you don't already follow him, please do. He does put out some pretty interesting stuff, and this caught my attention, this graphic here, because you can see here really since about 2000, when we had above normal precipitation during April, we've seen a rather distinct drop off in rainfall for this particular time of the year. Now that can be attributed to several things. I think, personally speaking, the 3-year La Nina does tend to lower precipitation over the British Isles. Generally speaking, we've had a fairly warm North Atlantic as well, and I think combining the cold Central and Eastern Pacific versus the warm Atlantic, we've also had late stratospheric warmings, for example, in the last couple of years as well. Last year, of course, coldest April since 1986. It was also the coldest overnight minimum month since 1922 for the UK. So last month really, or last year in April, really stuck out climatologically speaking in terms of an abnormal and extreme month for both dryness and cold. So there is stuff going on. There is very interesting things going on with the climate, and obviously when you're only speaking about a few years, that is a very short term period, but it's interesting, and it begs the question, what's going on, what's causing the drier Aprils? And I do think there is a whole mixture of different things, but La Nina's got to be having an impact. We've also got, of course, we're coming off the solar minimum from a couple of years ago. I think the combination of the solar minimum, the La Nina in place, the colder spring in the last couple of years as well, is all linked to that here. But it's a very complicated picture, of course. You can't just boil it down to a few words in a short video on YouTube to explain these things. It's a very, very complex thing, but it's very interesting. It really is, and it's interesting really how we've got quite a uniform amount of precipitation. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs during the period here, really from about 1900 right the way through to the 1970s, 80s. Also an interesting dip during the 1970s in terms of precipitation during the month of April in the UK, and that could go down to the cold waters in the North Atlantic shutting down precipitation, which makes sense. A colder North Atlantic would tend to lower precipitation. Warmer waters typically release more water vapor into the atmosphere, producing, of course, more rainfall. It also tends to lower pressure as well within the atmosphere. But it's interesting, actually, that also kind of almost slightly contradicts this downward turn in precipitation during April as well, because we've got a warmer than normal Atlantic here. So, like I say, it's a very complicated picture, that's for sure. What makes it even more interesting is when you look at the fact that we've got a very dry April going at the moment. This is the month of March, according to a chart from Simon Cardy. Very dry, month of March across the continent. Very wet across Iberia, which is quite interesting. And quite often when you do have very dry spells across the UK, you tend to have wetter conditions further south as well as further north. But this is the CFSV2 forecast for the month of May, precipitation wise, and it's indicating a wet May. So that's interesting. Now, of course, 2012 is a bit of an outlier in the overall trend of recent years. If we look back at the tweet sent by the Snow Dreamer, you can see here the downward trend, but 2012 was in fact the wettest April on record for the UK, and it is in the midst of that downward trend in precipitation. Now, back then we had a strong La Nina, 2010, 2011. Then we had the onset of an El Nino, and I believe anyway that is what enhanced rainfall all of a sudden across the UK. Again, complicated picture. It's not just one factor that's involved, but we had the onset of an El Nino. I didn't see that back in 2012. I did think that we were going to have a barbecue summer that year. It turned out to be a very miserable summer indeed. But it's interesting because we've got a lot of modelling indicating that we have a continuation of La Nina conditions here, and in a sense, what's causing, if we do get this surge of precipitation during the month of May, what's going to cause that? Is it the Madden-Julian oscillation? Is that going to trigger a change in the upper air pattern? Very complex, very interesting stuff indeed. If you look at the 500 millibar height anomaly chart for the month of May, we in fact have a trough over the UK versus a ridge in the east. Now, I will have my May forecast released probably tomorrow on marvelwinweather.com. I do urge you to have a look at that. It's going to have plenty of information on it with regards to what we've seen during the month of April, as well as what I expect to see during the month of May. Look at this here in terms of temperature anomaly. Colder than normal across Scotland, slightly colder than normal South Wales average generally across the rest of the British Isles as well as Ireland as well, warmer than normal as you would expect with this type of setup further east over Europe here. We're going to end April, we're going to begin May on a fairly chilly note. Negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation is going to be the driving force for the next couple of weeks, I think, and then what happens beyond that, of course, is open to question. So that's it for today. I appreciate you watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the video, and I'll have more on the next 10-day pattern hopefully in tomorrow's video. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll speak to you again tomorrow. Bye for now.